Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. In this show, we cover a broad range of topics that cater to both CRE newcomers and industry leaders alike. I'm your host, Shanti Ryle, Director of Content Marketing here at Crexi, and today we are thrilled to sit down with Jeff Enck, SVP at Matthews. A little bit about our guest before we get started. Jeff Enck stands as a distinguished Senior Vice President at Matthews Real Estate Investment Services, bringing over 2 decades of experience in retail investment sales. Throughout his 25-year tenure, Jeff has consistently demonstrated industry achievement and leadership, earning a reputation as a seasoned professional with hundreds of closed transactions on behalf of some of the most well-known names in real estate. Prior to Matthews, Jeff served as Senior Vice President for SRS Real Estate Partners. In this role, he spearheaded a new service line, specifically focusing on the sale of unanchored retail assets, which we will be getting into today. This initiative not only marked an expansion of SRS's capital market service offerings, but also underscored Jeff's commitment to maximize value for investment property clients. Jeff has been featured as both a speaker and guest writer in Shopping Center Business, Southeast Real Estate Business, and DataBank Retail Symposium, among others. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Shanti, thank you very much. Flattered to be here. I'm a longtime fan of the show and of Crexi, obviously. So just thrilled to be on. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Really appreciate you coming on. Very excited to have this conversation about a lot of things, but a rather hot topic in commercial real estate these days, which is strip retail centers. So we'll be getting a little bit more into that. But before we do, I know I just read through your bio, but I would love to hear in your own words, kind of more of a deep dive into your career path and, how you got to where you are. So you've been 25 years in this industry, going strong. What first pulled you into commercial real estate and why specifically strip centers?
Yeah, so I guess my first job out of college was as a territory manager for a carpet manufacturer. So they sent me to cover a territory down in Southwest Florida, kind of Gulf Coast, like Tampa, Clearwater, down to, Sarasota, down to Naples. Then I got transferred and took a position in Austin, Texas, covered South and Central Texas. And I'm from Georgia, so I've grown up around Georgia. I went to school at University of Georgia. Most of my friends were in Atlanta. I was in my mid-20s at that point, at 26 years old, a few years out of college, and decided that I wanted to get closer to home. So I was doing pretty well. I was enjoying carpet, but it was apparent that I was going to top out as far as, income and career path, that it was a little bit, there's a ceiling on how far you could go. So I was trying to figure out, okay, what can I do what can I do to like really, go as far as I go, can kind of write my own ticket. I don't have to worry so much about, companies being bought and sold. Although actually that's funny. I say that because that's happened to me. I'm sure we'll talk a little more about my companies being bought and sold while I was a broker. But so I decided I want to be in commercial real estate. And then in the 90s, it was kind of like, office buildings. I just liked big city skylines. So I thought I was going to be like a tenant rep for a law firm, or like just, figure out how to do deals in the commercial office space. And I was really enamored by that. So I moved back to Atlanta, got my real estate license, and got on with a national firm that was going to do investment sales. So I was in investment sales, or going to be. And then my boss, who was a shopping center guy, he had built and sold shopping centers. His name was Rick Ross. And Rick took me into his office, and we got along pretty well. And he kind of made me into his understudy. He's like, you're going to go sell shopping centers in Gwinnett County, which is like northwestern suburban Atlanta, or northeastern, sorry. And I was like, Rick, I don't want to do that. That's not what I came here for. I want to sell big, sexy office buildings. And so he's like, come to lunch. Let's talk. So anyway, he talked me into it. 25 years later, selling shopping centers still.
Yeah, he sold you on the idea, it sounds like. What did he say to talk you into it? How did that conversation go?
I think it was part of it is kind of who we had in the office at the time at that firm that could help me grow enough. And I felt like he was really going to be there to help me. And we had our other, I guess, kind of market leader, whatever you would say there. There was kind of two heads of the office in Atlanta at the time. He was from the West Coast and did a lot of shopping centers. So I felt like between the two of those guys, I was going to have some really good tutelage. And they were like, you can make just as much money in this. It's just going to be something different. And so I went for it, and it has worked out pretty well.
Yeah, he's like, I want you on my team, so you're gonna do what I sell.
Yeah, I was, glad to be on his team. So that
Yeah.
was
What do
cool.
you think he saw in you that made him go, hey, like I want to take you under my wing and teach you the ropes of this other place, even though you have your sights set on this, like you said, sexy office skyrise asset class?
That's a good question. I've never thought about that. I guess it's kind of like he saw a little bit of himself just, when he was younger, ambitious, wanted to conquer the world. And I think he maybe thought he could kind of live a little bit of that out as a coach through
Yeah.
me, which is cool. Now we have actually people that are working with us as juniors. So it's fun giving that back and being the mentor after being the mentee for a while.
Yeah, it's the circle of life, the circle of business.
Yeah.
So you start off doing unanchored strips early on in your career. What were the early days like for you as a broker in this particular segment? And maybe what were some early lessons learned, either as a young broker or maybe specifically with this asset class that you think set you up for success later on in your career?
Yeah, I think when I got started it was 1999, so the landscape was vastly different than what it is now. There was internet, but the internet was really not even set up really to sell commercial real estate very much yet. So it sounds like just olden days than it was like from a tech standpoint. So everything was like you would fax people information, and you would call people up and people expected to get calls and no one, a few people emailed, so email became a thing and that whole thing happened. But yeah, it was just, it was interesting because there wasn't a lot being built at the time. There was a good bit out there, but, like a lot of the out parcel and credit, out parcel retail type centers you see were not there at the time. But like a lot of Atlanta, suburban Atlanta was where I got started. So suburban Atlanta had a lot of just spec strip centers where they would just build a strip center and a developer would buy up some land for 2 acres of land. They would throw 15, 20,000 square feet of shops on and just cut it all up and put up a sign and lease it out. So,
Yeah, see who showed up.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So that it's interesting to think of kind of like how that process worked as the turn of the, I guess, century was going on. You had the internet becoming more prevalent. Do you think there were any key things you learned kind of like during that transition process, moving maybe from phones to emails or faxes to emails or eventually text? I feel like we never left phones behind. But do you think there's any like core, maybe biz dev strategies or communication strategies or just ways you found to be tried and true, even as the tech landscape of tools has changed as a broker?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was really interesting for me to see change was the price per square foot threshold was really low when I got
Mm,
into business. So I would have listings that would be like, I had a shopping center listing that was 40,000 feet. We were asking, I think, 5.5 million. So it was like 120 or 30 a foot or whatever it was. And people were just like, that is so expensive, like, which sounds crazy now. But I think what was interesting is seeing that just be shattered and shattered and shattered again. Um, so that was so I guess from a perspective of seeing something and thinking that you're in this box, like where you can only sell to these people who are going to buy it because it wasn't as much of a national marketplace at the time. And then like
mm,
everybody wants cheaper properties per square foot. So I just have to find other properties. And then I think you saw this national marketplace started really happening. You had a lot of capital start to come in from out of
mm.
the area into Atlanta because Atlanta was a growth city. We had the Olympics in 96 and we just kind of skyrocketed from there. So I think
Yes.
what was interesting was that, a lot of these West Coast people like would be like, we just sold, some apartments for like some crazy number in this $150 a foot sounds like dirt cheap to us. So then you started seeing, as the internet and all the connectivity began to happen a little more, we saw that there were much more possibilities from how you could deliver for your selling clients, because the people who were paying the highest prices were not the people that own the property next door or the property in town, or the people that own all the property in town. It was somebody from another town. So I think learning to access all that as the technology was sort of evolving on the fly was an art form that you just kind of had to work out.
Yeah, and it's not changed. I mean, AI is that new technology these days for brokers, and I see a lot of really interesting experiments happening. So I think
Yeah.
that core skill of having that curiosity and willingness to try new things is crucial, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think once somebody does it and it works, then everybody jumps on it. I think that'll be, because I think we're still in that stage with AI with commercial real estate where it's like we don't know really what to do with it yet. I think people have some ideas, but I haven't seen anybody do something astounding that everybody's jumped on yet. But I bet that's coming. Somebody smart is going to figure that out.
Yeah, we've got some AI stuff in the pipeline. We can't talk about it yet, but
I'm sure. Yeah, you guys are a tech company at heart. I'm sure Crexi or somebody like you guys will figure it out.
There's just a lot of exciting things, I think, on the table in the world of AI and commercial real estate. And yeah, I think it's that creativity again that goes really well hand in hand. The people who are willing to experiment, to be a little bit more entrepreneurial, are probably gonna get the most success out of it. Speaking of entrepreneurship, I feel like the life of a broker has its highs and lows. There's good years, there's bad years. I'm curious, do you have a moment in your career that was maybe more challenging professionally? And what helped you get through it? Or did you alternatively have like any favorite mistakes that, were blunders at the time, but you realized, oh, actually, these
Look
are
at my
really
list here. Yeah.
important things you had to learn to really level up success wise.
Yeah, sure. Tons and tons of mistakes. I mean, it was, really candidly, the brokerage business was really hard. And I think what somebody told me was that you get started and you don't know what you don't know, which sounds like such a blanket statement. And there's kind of no other way to explain it other than like, you just have to go into it and figure it out. So that's for sure a real thing. But yeah, it was, first 3 years were really hard. You'd get a deal and you'd feel like you're cooking, and then it would, the velocity was not the same then. So it was a little slower market. So it took a while to get going, but yeah. So, I'd say early on, I took some listings that didn't sell. So I kind of learned, as a broker, you learn probabilities and kind of what is going to sell and what's not going to sell, and who's a real buyer, how to negotiate. I mean, there's just so many nuances, what can blow up in a deal. And a lot of that stuff is you don't know until you know it, because you don't know what you don't know. But yeah, there was, I mean, there's so many deals. I'm just trying to think. The one deal, I guess the obvious, I've had a few really big deals that were really good ones. And that was, we had a really good client that sold some smaller properties with us, and he gave us a big one. And we got that one closed. And big at the time for me was 12 million. And that was in 2003, which actually happened. We closed that the day before my wedding. So that was kind of like,
a good little wedding present.
Deal. Yeah. What's that?
A good little wedding present.
Good little wedding present from God. That was a good one. And our good client there. So that one, some of these deals you get when you're younger, you don't have as much overhead. You're just kind of going deal to deal. Then a big deal hits and you have like, okay, now you have months ahead of you of your expenses paid. And then you just try to keep it going and keep it going. Eventually you reach critical mass. But yeah, the one tough one, I mean, I got into a property and I bought a property right at the peak of the market. And that was 2006. And of course, 2008 was around the corner. Long story short, we lost that property, and lesson learned, but scarred but smarter, as they say. But that was a harsh one, but we came out of it smarter. And at the time, we were in good company. Like, I remember just having lunches and dinners and breakfast anywhere you would meet somebody in real estate. They're like, "Oh yeah, we just lost this to the bank. Oh yeah, we lost our deals at the bank." Everyone was losing deals in that REO cycle. That GFC was just brutal for people. But everybody made out, and we all came back. So I came back from that.
Yeah. I'm curious, I'm sure at the time it was devastating, right? Especially, like you said, with all that shared misery in the market. I'm sure sentiment was just really low. How do you think, and you can just speak for yourself personally, how did you pull out of that? And like, what do you think made you more resilient after that crash?
It's funny. Some things you kind of just back into, and they just sort of happen for you. But I think, number one, it was surprisingly encouraging just to have such a wrecked market. After, if you lose a property, it's better to lose it like when everybody else who is smarter than you is also losing properties.
It's not me, it's other things. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So that
true.
was, strangely comforting. But, it was in 2008. I closed the deal in 2008 in January. And I think it might have been the only CMBS loan that was put on a retail property for the Atlanta MSA for the whole year. And I think it was like an $8 million loan or whatever. But that tells you where the velocity of the market was. It was nothing. And it was like that 08, 09. And like, you literally could not do anything to make a deal. Then finally the deals started going back to the banks. So then we got some REO business. But during those 2 years, it was like, okay, I'm looking through my Rolodex. Like, who do I know that can like hire me to do this or do that? I got my appraiser's license. I was trying to do property management. I was trying to lease properties. And I've never done any of that stuff. I was like, well, if I can just get a few bucks here and there, a few bucks here and there, just like to pay bills. And it was just so hard. And then eventually it was like, you look for jobs and they weren't there. And like, you're stuck. I was stuck in brokerage. So I'm like, all right, I'm in brokerage. We're just going to do this. So the REO cycle kicked in. We started doing some deals, and even then it was tough because they were like, okay, this is a $8 million property in 2006. Now it's $2.5 million. So it's like, you can sell it, but you can do the math. Like, the fees are not going to be the same for all these smaller properties. You had to sell a bunch of them. So it was tough, but it was, I guess it kept me in the business. I had nowhere else to go, maybe.
Yeah. And honestly, I appreciate you mentioning, like, you got your appraiser's license, you tried to upskill in all these different ways, learn different corners of the industry. Really, it sounds like you never stopped trying to make yourself more valuable to the people that you would eventually work with. And, I think as we're kind of just hopefully coming out of the bottom end of a market cycle, I think we're really seeing that play out again. The people who kept hitting the phones, kept learning, kept their knowledge base up of what's going on in the market, um, kept themselves relevant, are the ones that are really going to see the protracted success in the long run as, the people come roaring back to start doing deals again. So I appreciate that you called that out, because I think that's something a lot of people, they encounter rough times and then they're like, okay, I'm going to go, I don't know, become an architect or something. Like, do anything else when they encounter those roadblocks.
Yeah, it's I think the nice thing about a down market is if you make it through, like, you end up having a little more market share, because a lot of the people in your business might not have made it through. And people evolve and move on to other things, and at some point everybody does. But I think it's kind of a positive point to, if you make it through and then the velocity kicks in, you have X market share. It's now X market share of a bigger number. So that's the benefit if you can make it through. And I think things look pretty good for commercial real estate. I'd say I think the velocity, like for strip centers, were hit the low in 2023, a little higher in 2024. And we're
Mm,
feeling a little like there's excitement. There's like this revving engine that wants to go. It's not quite going yet, but
mm.
I feel like we're getting really close. We'll
Yeah.
see how it all plays out here.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. Shifting gears a little bit, getting into the world of strip centers, strip mall retail. Um, there, like you said, there is a bit of a buzz underneath this particular asset class. I think retail in general proved to be surprisingly resilient amidst a lot of perhaps overvaluation or asset classes that were constricted by supply chain, labor issues, construction, starts, stops. Uh, you have a lot of these retail centers that were honestly there. And now that you bring it up, I feel like maybe a lot of that construction was happening more in like the 80s, 90s, uh, in a completely different time. But here they are still doing really well. So I would love to, you know, your 25 years working in these assets, what have you seen historically? Give us a little bit of backstory to the context of all this kind of like undercurrent of excitement in this sector.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it is pretty like surreal seeing this incredible interest in unanchored retail strip centers. So it's fun, but it's also like shining this light on the space. Like everybody's kind of jumps into a hot asset class at times. It seems like that happens a lot, but historically, like I think, well, for sure, unanchored retail has historically been owned by private owners, like almost exclusively. Like you'd have maybe a REIT would buy a strip center along with a grocery center, and they might just have it, or they could flip it off and sell it to somebody else. But for the most part, the institutions didn't want it.
Mm.
The first time I saw like somebody who had raised a fund to buy unanchored retail centers was, I think, probably 2010 or 11. There's a group actually based out of uh, Hilton Head, Charleston, and then they're kind of Atlanta based now, and that's South Coast, if you know South Coast. And at the time, John Morgan Sr. was, I kind of heard it through the grapevine. This guy has put together a fund and is just buying unanchored retail centers for 9 caps. And like at the time, a 9 cap was pretty easy to find, like in 2010 or 11, like you could find them all day, which
Yeah.
sounds like that's awesome. So they
Yeah.
built up a nice portfolio. It was kind of like this train you're just trying to jump on, like throw deals at them, like, and just like try to do that because they were an obvious buyer. If you knew what they liked, you could just find it and sell it to them. And that's kind
Mm.
of where the whole thing has gone today. But there's still obviously value to working a process through with your sellers. But so they were one of the first, and then we saw a few others enter the market. I had a few meetings with, like, you get ICSC and you meet these people. Last Mile got into the game, and they were a pretty active one. One of the earlier ones, Crow Holdings, has been doing it forever. They always really like really nice stuff, but they've built up a lot of nice things. They were probably actually a little bit before South Coast. And then you had, I think the other one was Center Square that I'm thinking of, that I met in like one of these ICSC conferences. And at some point I was thinking, like, a lot of what these guys wanted to buy, gals, the funds and institutional type buyers wanted to buy, was kind of not available, or I didn't really feel like it was as available as what South Coast was buying originally. And so I just kind of was like, yeah, these guys will find some deals and they'll fill up their fund or whatever. And before I knew it, it was kind of like another fund would enter the market. And like the last 24 months, maybe a little beyond that, from now, it almost became a joke. Like we would hear, like, get calls from like very big institutions, like with money in New York, like legit, like big money, and be like, yeah, I think we're thinking of getting into unanchored retail strips. Like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
And I guess there were a few other things that happened as all this momentum was kind of building. Like, I think one of the biggest ones was there's a Wall Street Journal article like saying unanchored retail strips or strip malls are the king of retail, or the
Yep.
king of real estate right now. And that
was recently, right? I think I
yeah, well,
remember
that
when
was
it
like
came
2
out.
years ago, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and that
remember.
was like really when the spotlight, and then you have strip mall guy on the internet, and he has
Yeah.
his own fund, and everybody's like, all of a sudden, it's just like a ton of interest in this space now. So it's a
Yeah.
good time to be in it. It's interesting. It's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. What about these strip centers is so fascinating? What do you think from a fundamental perspective is driving all this interest? And how has that fundamental aspect maybe changed as, the economy and the retail and commercial real estate landscape has shifted?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, the validation points are like the articles that come out, like, and then you see the other funds and people actually buying them. So that's giving it validity. So at this point, it's sort of a foregone conclusion because you have these people who have proven it out, proven the concept out, proven out
Mhm.
the thesis. But I think what's been interesting is I think these anybody who's looking for real estate is looking for a cash flow stream if you're buying
Mhm.
investment real estate. So the stability of the cash flow stream is really the most important thing, the reliability of the cash flow stream, and then how much can I make.
Mm.
So what's happened is that people are looking to unanchored retail centers going, hey, this mom and pop dry cleaner has been here for 20 years. This pizza restaurant has been here for 15 years. You know, the list goes on and on. There's like a, you know, uh, a tailor or a barber shop or a nail salon or a little gym or just endless numbers of little retail tenants. And they all have their own businesses. They have their heart and souls into these businesses.
Mhm.
And they depend on the success of their business to put food on their own table. So I think people began to realize that these tenants are pretty solid. Like they're more solid than people think. And after pre-COVID, you had this mindset that retail was dying. And even now, we are seeing some big box retailers that are not Amazon proof that are still
Mhm.
getting taken out to the woodshed. And then you came into COVID, and then we saw kind of how that all played out. We can probably talk more about that. But when we came out of COVID, we realized that, okay, retail is here to stay, especially essential service retail is like really here to stay. These people are making it. They've survived COVID. And you look around the retail landscape, the entire country is like 95 to 96% occupied for retail now, for
Mm.
unanchored retail
Yeah.
specifically. So it's the thesis has proven out that the mom and pop tenants are successful. And if, the location of the property is good, the intrinsics are good, people are always going to go there for convenience. And if it's an essential service business, you
Yeah.
can count on that rent as much as you can count on a credit tenant.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's nice to see it. I remember we talked previously in our prep call for this conversation, and you were saying, the perception used to be they were kind of less sophisticated than other retail assets. There wasn't much of an interest prior, I think, like you said, to COVID really proving out the resiliency of these people who depend on these retail spots for their livelihood to feed their families. So you mentioned that these funds are new to the market and that a lot of strip centers are still in the hands of private ownership. What does that swath of private ownership look like right now? Is it more local funds? Are there, like you said, out of state fund or not funds, but groups that are more interested in what you're particularly working with? Is it, mom and pop family legacy inherited real estate? Kind of give us a picture of what does that uh, cadre of ownership look like? And what does that mean for how the market might shift as more of these funds get into the business?
So really, yeah, I would say you're probably 85, maybe even up almost to 90% of the properties are still owned by private owners. and maybe it's a little less than that. But when I say private owners, that could be a myriad of different buyer types or ownership
Mhm.
types or structures. It could be, just a literal husband and wife that happen to buy property. We see people that move to the United States and scrap and claw their way into buying like a convenience store that has some shops, and then they sell it and they buy another one and they buy another one. So we see a lot of international people coming to America, buying and building little real estate portfolios. So a lot of those kind. We see international, people from Asia, uh, you know, not so much Europe, but mostly Asia, maybe some Middle East countries
Mhm.
coming and investing and doing really well across the country. Then you could just have like, I guess it would be like a traditional syndicator buyer who could be, somebody that just pools together, you know, 10 people, kind of country club money. They put their money together and then they pay everybody in return. There's a guy that runs them. So
Mhm.
there are plenty of those guys out there. But it is still mainly just private capital, whether it's, syndications, family partnerships, wealthy family offices. When you think of family offices, typically a little bit larger
Mhm.
um, portfolios. But yeah, those are still traditionally the primary owners.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. Do you think that these public larger funds are going to try to encroach a little bit more on that space? Do you think you'll find like a willing seller in that
Yeah,
regard,
well,
or
they
do you think
totally
it's going
want
to stay
to. I
pretty
mean, they
tight?
totally want to. I think what's going to prohibit that from happening, it's not even prohibiting it from happening. I think it's the perspective of it is that if you've got, the math on it is a roughly, say, 68, 70,000 strip centers across the country.
Mhm.
Now, if you define strip center, it's like just say 10 to 50,000 square feet without an anchor. And so that wouldn't include like a two tenant Starbucks and Aspen Dental, or like a Chipotle and a Verizon. That's not what we're talking about when I'm talking about
Mhm.
these kind of strip centers. But if you're talking about 10 to 50,000 square feet, that's what the institutions are looking for.
Mhm.
But what happens is, as we were talking, I think I'm not sure if we were talking about it offline before, but a lot of these properties were built on spec, meaning they just
Mhm.
developer would buy some land, they would just build them. Um, so I think what happens, I mean, you have so many different levels of professionalism who built these properties. So I guess let me just get around to what I'm getting to is
Sure.
the intrinsics of all these properties are so varied that
Mm.
there's only a narrow part of the, say, 68,000 strip centers across the country going to fit into that category. So, like, if you
Sure.
take all the intrinsics of any given strip center, like you look at location, how old it is, the visibility, like what's the access like is it L shaped? Do you have credit? Do you have, you know, 2 stories? Do you have,
Yeah.
perpendicular to the road? Like a lot of these things, when you start looking at them, you realize that it narrows it down very much. You're not really categorizing strip centers into class at this point.
Yeah.
But
It's
if
not
you're
just a
saying,
rubber
okay,
stamp.
yeah, but it's the best of these properties, just call them A class for the sake of discussion. Those are the
Yeah.
ones that the institutions are after. And really, if you're taking the 60 or the 69,000, then you're talking about maybe 15% of those, or maybe
Mm.
15 to 20% of those, or maybe even a little less. I mean, then at that point, you're talking about 10 to 15,000 or 10 or 15,000 strip centers across the country that they're going to buy. And I think
Yeah.
that's where you're going to see these institutional groups are going to start really owning that space more and more.
Mm.
Number one, they're all in buy mode right now. So when any one of them comes onto the market, one of those groups is very likely to be the buyer.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see that start to happen. But overall, I think it's going to continue to be a privately held space.
Sure. Yeah, I'm curious, uh, in addition to that, these institutions are in buy mode. They're going to snap them up. They're ready to really double down on this particular section of the strip mall asset sector. What other trends have you seen over the last maybe 5, 10 years, as much as you want to attribute any of these to COVID or not, that have really maybe surprised you? And how do you think they're gonna guide the arc of the sector, for the next 5, 10 years?
Are you talking about what tenant specific or
We
just
can
in
go in
general?
any direction. So with what tenants you see coming in, what kind of agreements there are, maybe, like, do you see these private groups getting more expansive the way these institutions are? What is there anything that surprised you or, that you think is interesting that you've noticed and wanna keep tracking
Yeah,
as
I
time
think
passes?
well, one of the things that gives these strip centers such appeal is because they are in such stark contrast to like the out parcel centers. So like an out parcel center, if you have like we were talking about, like it's got a Starbucks and it's got a Chipotle or whatever, those
Mhm,
rents are going to be 50, $60 a square foot. So if you're buying that for return at a 6.5 cap or 6 cap or whatever it is, then you look at maybe that's $800, $900 a square foot,
mhm,
which is nuclear compared to what we've got in the strip center space. So I think what really has surprised me most coming out of COVID was number one, the interest for the buyers have been there across all categories, including the funds. But the other thing was the rent growth has been tremendous. And I think it's
mhm,
because there is that big contrast, that big gap between the out parcel centers and just an ordinary mom and pop center.
hmm,
Like the Chipotle and AT&T store deal with $50 rents could be two doors down from an older strip center that's not as beautiful and pretty and new, but it could have 25, $30 rents in it. And to
mhm,
that's what where there's a lot of appeal because there's great safety in that. Because if you lose a tenant, we've talked about this concept like them being like strip centers like retail apartments, right? Like you have a tenant
mm,
and they don't make it, it's 1,500 square feet. Great, move them out and you move somebody else in, and now you get to reset to the current market, which works well when the market's going up, right? I mean,
yeah,
when you got rent growth the way we've had, but that's been the most surprise. The most surprising thing is probably the rent growth that's been there. We notice. I mean, we noticed it a lot, but a year ago and last year in Vegas, we had this conversation over and over and over, where somebody would have a strip center. They would say, "Hey, our tenant came to us and say they were we're not going to accept the new terms. They were out of options." And the landlord said, okay, your rent's going from 20 to $28 a foot now. And they're like, well, we can't pay that. And they go down the street and they come back and they say, okay, we'll take the deal, because there's nowhere to go. So the
wow,
big surprise for me, I think, above anything, has really been the rent growth.
wow. Yeah, that's impressive, and I'm curious kind of what are the long tail effects of that? Are you seeing tenants, like, really just figuring out a way to level up and, like, meet those prices? Are you seeing, I mean, and this is all dependent perhaps on what the next year, next couple of years look like. We're kind of question marks all over with how tariffs are gonna impact the average consumer, the average retail business, and other sectors of the market, definitely. Um, but yeah, I think are you seeing them kind of meet that challenge of higher rent growth?
Yeah, I think, the tenants, it all comes down to what a customer can pay at the end of the day. And,
Mhm.
we've obviously seen some great very not great as necessarily a good thing, but very high inflation, and that's go, filtered down to everything from cost of whatever you're buying, cup of coffee
Mhm.
or a piece of pizza. We're going out to dinner, going to the nail salon, whatever you're doing, all the way down to the rents that people are paying is like one of the is actually one of the later things, because people have had, if you're in a retail center, you have a lease, you have a certain term for your lease, and it doesn't come up for a while. That's been one of the last things to have the
Mhm.
increase. Like all their costs of service, cost of goods has gone up, um, all their other costs have gone up, electricity, everything has gone up, and now it's kind of rent's time to go up. So I think we're seeing that people are, everyone has complained about everything, and from
Yeah.
cost of a gallon of milk to everything. Now it's just it's kind of rent's time to grow at this point.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think there's probably also some interesting conversations coming out of post-COVID where a lot of landlords and tenants were willing to come to the table and negotiate, how can we get through this period, especially good tenants, that they would want to stick in those those units for longer term.
Yeah, I mean, I think COVID was certainly it seems like forever ago almost, but it was really a good testing point for retail overall. And what we found specifically with strip centers is that the mom and pops, you knew who was going to make it right away and who wasn't. Now, looking back, we didn't know how long or short COVID was going to last, so it was a little more nerve-wracking at the time. But looking back, it's really clear, like the operators that were in it, to be successful and knew what they were doing, were successful, we're going to make it, we're going to survive, we're going to do whatever they could do to make it. The tenants that were, suspect, and there's always, a lot of retailers out there, mom and pop in particular, can be, poor operators. We saw those get just kind of taken out pretty quickly through COVID. And I think what happened is you have kind of a culling of things where, now everything is vastly improved. The operators are all better. Some people have opened second and third locations or, gone from 10 to 20 or whatever the case may be for small operators.
Sure. Yeah, I'm curious, in that vein, can you give us a couple examples of is it the businesses themselves? Is it the type of business? And then do you see the landscape of what kind of tenants are coming into these strip centers shifting at all? I think we talked a little bit on our prep call about experiential retail getting more and more popular, especially post-COVID. What are you seeing in those areas?
Yeah, I think, the most obvious one would be, medical and dental. And those have proven to be great tenants because you could have a small practice open in a strip center. Could be a dental practice, and they're fantastic tenants because they come in and they spend money on their space. The landlord spends money with them. They put in all their equipment, and then they just park for years and years at a time. So we're seeing those be good tenants. Urgent care has been another one. Those tend to be more along the lines of credit, but you do see them in a lot of strip centers. You see them in out parcel centers also. But those are really good ones. And, then restaurants are, evolving always, but I think you're just seeing, you're seeing a lot of the franchise type restaurants do really well and expand. There was a comment made. We did a roundtable with some of these owners of the strip centers recently, and there was, I think it was Ryan Moore from Last Mile made the comment that, when you have a brand of a pizza place or whatever it is, and a lot of times they'll have 20% of them will be owned by the corporate guaranteed and owned and operated by the corporation, and the rest are 80% are the franchisee tenants. He said the franchisee tenants are always better performers. And he's like, I would rather have the better performer than the credit lease, which I thought was really interesting too.
Yeah, they got skin in the game.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, yeah, another kind of catchphrase is that and try to give credit where I got this, and I'll have to look back and give credit where it's due. But it's been said that, for the mom and pop operators, whether they're franchisee or not, like the decisions are being made around the kitchen table as opposed to the boardroom table, which I think it's really interesting to think about. I mean, because people's livelihood is really being affected by, whatever decisions they're making for the retail spaces for their businesses.
It matters a lot more. Definitely matters a lot more.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What do you think is the biggest threat to strip centers in the coming decade?
I think you're always going to have, until they figure out how to get your hair cut or how to eat through the internet, or AI maybe is going to somehow do this. I think strip centers will be really fine. I think they've got staying power, and I don't think there's anything that's going to really harm strip centers.
Mm.
Now, I think if you go back to what we were talking about the intrinsics of a strip center, if you have, an inferior location, you have, bad access, some of the intrinsics that are gonna, an older center, dilapidated, it doesn't look good anymore, needs upgrade, that kind of thing. Once the economy, if it turns and you don't have 95% leased anymore across 69,000 strip centers,
Mhm.
then you're going to be, the tide is going to come down. You're going to see where everybody's exposed, and it's going to be, those B and C class centers that don't have the quality intrinsics. So the strips that are being bought by the funds now are very, very secure, in my opinion.
Mm.
But I
Yeah.
think it's going to come down to the intrinsics. If the economy overall weakens, I think it'll affect some of those. But anything that's, essential in a service and something you can't duplicate,
Yeah.
then I think they're going to do well.
It sounds like there's a lot of opportunity in those B and C properties to perhaps have some value add investment put in and shore them up in case, those circumstances do come to pass.
Yeah, in some cases you can, like you can take an old property and fix it up, but
Mhm.
you can't change your access in a lot of cases. You can't change
Sure.
if you're built sideways to the street or L-shaped with a dead spot in the middle. Like there's some things you can't solve for.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's lots of people looking for upside deals, and I wish
Yep.
there were more of them out there. They're
Yep.
hard to
Yep.
find.
Yep. Definitely. Um, if you had to bet on one subsegment of strip centers, so whether it's drive-through paths, neighborhood strips, urban infill, we just talked about value add, which one are you most interested in personally?
I mean, this is gonna be so boring, but you know,
Boring's good.
just like Gwinnett County, Georgia, right? Suburban strips that are well located that just, have rents that are somewhat below the market that aren't supercharged. That would be where I would invest my money.
Mm,
I think they're very safe. I mean, you can go rogue and try to do upside, but you got to have the intrinsics there. I mean, the value add's great. It's just if it's value add now, when the market is 95% lease, there's usually a reason that it's value add. Um,
sure.
I mean, people that own these things are generally pretty smart. I mean, I think there's that perception out there that oh, somebody's just mismanaging it. I'm just going to be the wizard and come in and do it. And
Yeah.
they're
Not
not a
always the
lot of
case.
those. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean,
Totally.
I would just, the boring old strip center that's, the street goes in the front here and the strip center is parallel to it right behind it. Just good access all
Yeah.
day.
See every sign as you drive by. Real important.
Yeah, that's right. Definitely. Definitely.
And then do you think, we talked about this a little bit, I think, on our prep call, talking about how e-commerce is playing into retail. Do you think more logistics parcels or any kind of last mile local delivery is going to interplay a little bit more with strip centers? Do you think they'll, have a little back part of the property, or how do you envision those things coming more together as e-commerce continues to grow?
That's interesting. We haven't seen it a lot, if at all, really in the strip center space because
Mm,
most of our tenants are, you know, purely service oriented. We have seen it in, my team sells larger institutional properties. We've seen, some of these big retailers adapt and do well who are doing, online plus brick and mortar. And then the brick and mortar
mm,
becomes kind of it's a retail store plus an outlet, like a logistical piece, like last mile logistical piece where it's somebody wants it today, rather than wait,
yeah.
God forbid you wait 2 days for Amazon or 1 day for Amazon. I want
Yeah.
Best Buy and I want to go to the store now. You order online, go pick it up. Walmart's doing it.
Mm,
So I think that's capable. That's possible for anybody to do.
yeah.
But generally, you're not buying products in a strip center because if you're
Sure.
buying a product, I think you're going to be beat out by Amazon or somebody online or a bigger retail that's going to beat you.
Yeah, what comes to my mind is kind of more those like mom and pop little like tchotchke stores you see. That it's just like there's a 101, someone really passionate about curating things they love and want to sell. So it's maybe is not as applicable in a e-commerce world, but
Yeah, right.
people like going to those stores.
Yeah, I mean, I think, anytime you can get something unique and get people to want to go to them, I think, you can do well because, it's either like you go to a strip center for convenience or, or you shop for anything really for convenience or for price or something that you can't get anywhere else. And so I think there's always a place for that.
Yeah, totally. All right. I want to be mindful of your time. We've been going a good long while and really appreciate
This
you
is
and
great.
everything. So before we go into our rapid fire questions section, what advice would you give current landlord, up and coming landlord who wants to buy a strip, or even developers trying to really invest in or develop a solid, like future-proofed strip asset?
Yeah, I mean, the development side, it's interesting, the development side, because we haven't seen like pure strip center development really hardly at all. It's mostly out parcel center because nobody's building them like spec anymore. Like you're building a strip center because you've got, or an out parcel center because you've got Starbucks or, a national brand tenant. But it would be interesting to see someone crack that code.
Yeah.
I feel like the construction cost has gotten so high that it's been difficult to build anything other than these credit strips because the cost of building a building is the same if it's on the pin corner, if it's not as well located, but would be a good strip center site.
Yeah, the materials are the same.
Right. So it's still going to cost you like, $400 a foot to build start to finish, for average strip center. So it's tough, but I think, you look for the location is going to be a spot that you're going to, that people are going to easily get to. So convenience is a thing. And then you're curating your tenants correctly. I would say you seek out the people who are really good at each thing, meaning I know some like developers that are really good at curating a really cool experiential tenant mix. And that can be a piece to it. The location is a piece, the access is a piece, finding that right piece of land. At this point, all of retail is pretty much built up in most of the metro areas. So you're talking about going to a secondary area, or you're talking about trying to piece together, a handful of older buildings and scraping them and building. So there's a lot of creativity. I think there's a lot to it. It's got a lot of brain damage. And I think that's why you see the funds that are just kind of like, let's just go buy existing and make a return.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's why the sector to me is so fascinating because there are those assets that are just like, buy, value, flip. And there's so many that you need that creativity and you can really, if you can envision something really cool, it could pay off really, really well.
Yeah.
I'm actually curious, this wasn't on my list of rapid fire questions, but I'm going to ask it because you answered one of my other ones earlier. So are you ready? You ready for this last question? If you could build out the perfect mix of strip mall tenants in your strip center, who would you put in there and why?
That's interesting. I think it would just be like all the places that I go to, like, there's no cigar place in Peachtree. I live in Peachtree City, which is like deep suburbia, southern side of Atlanta. There aren't any cigar stores out here. So if anybody's listening that wants to open a cigar shop in Peachtree City, please do it, and I'll partner with you.
Okay, so cigar shop.
Cigar shop. I mean, then it's restaurants. It's like pizza cannot miss. So I would go restaurants. Then I kind of like the wellness thing as sort of an up and comer. Like the wellness thing is kind of like you go in and you can do like the cryo and you can do the like the people do IVs and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that would be another thing.
Okay.
Just a dentist, and I would put a dentist in. I'm just trying to think if that's the good mix. I'm just thinking of my favorite tenants. You have to
Yeah.
you'd make a big list, and then you go, okay, this tenant doesn't go with this. This doesn't
Yeah,
go
you
with
gotta
this.
match them. You gotta match make a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a solid 4 to start though. So if
Yeah.
there's any business owners out there looking for a spot, they know to hit you up.
Yeah. And then dentist. I mean, dentist is like just rock solid. I would love dentist, of course.
Yeah. We love our dentists.
Yep.
Oh, love it. And then what is the craziest way you found a new client or new deal? Whether it's social media, random like bathroom of some nice restaurant, any crazy client stories you have?
Gosh, I wish I saw that question. I didn't think hard enough about that one because I know I've got an answer for that, and I can't think of
Yeah.
one now. Yeah, there was actually there was one where I got my first firm that I was with. This is a pretty interesting story. There was a guy who was kind of new in the business and sort of he had done management and some leasing and stuff. He got in and kind of got out, and as he was leaving, he's like, "Hey, I got the name of this guy. Like, it's on a sticky note. It's like, give it a shot. Like, I could never get anywhere with him." Called him up and kind of started talking a little bit, and ended up doing a few deals that way. So, sticky note,
A sticky
kind
note.
of warmish lead. I don't know. That was kind of an interesting one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's all kinds of people like I did actually bump into somebody in the bathroom at Charlotte ICSC
There you go.
that I had been emailing and talking to before. And I was standing here, there's this guy here and another guy here was like, "Hey, so-and-so, I remember, like, hey, I know you." And then so I got his name. So note to self, follow up with him. "Hey, I was stalking you in the bathroom. Let's do a deal."
Hilarious. Put that in the subject line. Very memorable for sure.
Very
I
memorable.
would be like, what? Click that email. And then finally, promise this is not a trick question. What is your favorite tool or software that you use day to day on the job?
What do I use every day? My favorite hack recently is I deciding if I want to share this or not because it's pretty cool.
Mm.
Like LinkedIn has connected me with like some really interesting people. Like not necessarily a lot of clients. I feel like there are some people out there I can do business with, but some of the people that are, would be like a vendor to me are interesting. So like I found people on like LinkedIn has been good for me to meet people who are like, "Hey, I can help you find people you can't find." Like that kind of thing has been cool. Like to help like, "Hey, we're going to help you make some videos," and that kind of stuff. So LinkedIn has been kind of cool from that standpoint. It's sort of like a social media for me is kind of a thing that sucks me in. So I try not to get too caught up with it.
Yeah.
But if I may, I mean, we were talking beforehand, and since I'm on the Crexi podcast, I do have to say I really do like Crexi. As we were saying, Zach came into Atlanta in our small shop in my old firm called Shane Investment Property Group when I was with them for years. Zach came and introduced us to Crexi. And yeah, we were there. I think you said it was 10 years ago that you guys started. So we're fans of Crexi. We use Crexi a lot, and it's probably where we find more, as far as third parties, platforms, it helps us probably more than any of the other third parties. I would say it's probably our favorite.
Appreciate that. We love to hear it. I love hearing success stories.
I'm not just saying that because I'm on the show, but yeah.
No. I'll send you the check in the mail later. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, Jeff. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate you sitting down and spending the time with us. Where can people connect with you if they want to get in touch, learn more about what you do? You said social media, so LinkedIn's one, but email, anywhere else that people can get in touch.
Yeah, here's a throwback one. You can call me.
Hey.
My phone number is 404-849-1631. Or you can email. I am on all the platforms. I'm on LinkedIn. It's Jeff Enck is my name, ENCK. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter actually now, and I think I might be on Instagram now. We'll see.
Ooh, exciting.
For commercial, we'll see if it works for commercial real estate. Email is always a good one. That's jeff.enck@matthews.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you so much. I
Yeah,
appreciate
and
being
thank
on,
you.
and love the show, and glad to be on today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone who tuned in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please do not miss the next one. Visit crexi.com/podcast and sign up to get the very next episode delivered straight to your inbox. Of course, you can also subscribe to the Crexi Podcast on your favorite podcast app or check out our YouTube channel for video recordings of each and every episode. Take care and be sure to tune in next time.